It's my pleasure to welcome you all today to our fifth symposium on economic policy entitled The New Middle East Economy. This symposium series is being organized by the Institute of Financial Economics. IFE, formerly known as the Institute of Money and Banking, was founded in 1985 thanks to the efforts of Dr. Maqdisi and 5 generous banks, Maudi, BLF, Blum, Biblos, and Credit Libani. Just a short announcement. I'm very happy to announce that the team at the IFE has recently created a financial stress index for Lebanon. It's the first financial stress index for Lebanon. So this index takes into account all vulnerability indicators in the Lebanese economy in such a way as to detect various episodes of high stress, low stress. It can be used to help policymakers, once vulnerabilities are detected, to determine when and which tools to use to mitigate or even hopefully avoid any financial disasters. The team was led by Dr. Layal Mansour, and the work is almost completed. We have yet to publish the working paper series, and of course we'll be launching it, and you'll all be invited to that event. As you can see today, the event is being videotaped, so as soon as it's available on YouTube, I'll be posting the link to our Facebook page. Thank you very much. I'll give the floor now to Dr. Maqdisi, who will be presenting the speaker and will be moderating this session. Thank you.
Thank you, Layla. Again, on behalf of the Institute, I should like to welcome warmly Rabah Araski, who is, as you know, he is not only a distinguished economist, but also currently occupies the position of Chief Economist for the Middle East and North Africa region at the World Bank. Previously, he was the Chief of the Commodities Unit in the Research Department of the IMF. He also was a senior fellow at Harvard University's St. John's School of Government, a non-resident fellow at the Brookings Institution, an external research associate at the University of Oxford, a resource person for the African Economic Research Consortium, and now he's a research fellow at the Economic Research Forum headquartered in Cairo. Dr. Araski's research covers a wide array of topics on energy and the environment, the macro-developmental resource-rich countries, institutions, human capital, innovation, and economic growth. He is the author and co-author of publications in leading academic journals, many of which have been widely cited. He is also the co-editor or co-author of our 4 books, including Beyond the Curse, Policies to Harness the Power of Natural Resources, Commodity Price Volatility, and Inclusive Growth in Labor Income Countries, Shifting Commodity Markets in a Globalized World, and Coping with the Climate Crisis, Migration Policies, and Global Coordination, which is forthcoming. Is it already out? It's already out?
In a few weeks.
A few weeks. Columbia University Press. Dr. Araski received his PhD in economics from the European University Institute in Florence. His lecture will focus on how the MENA region, which has too long relied on public spending as its main engine for growth, how it can harness the power of external waves of technological innovation into internal source of growth and job creation. Put differently, if I may say so, how the Middle East region can move from its traditional developmental model to a needed new developmental model. He will argue that to succeed in this endeavor, to move into this new developmental model, the region needs to adapt several key areas, including its internet and payment systems, its regulatory framework, its educational system, its tech state capacity, and the financing of agriculture for startups. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Araski. Rabah, 45 minutes, and then we can open it up for comments.
All right. I'm going to stand. Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm delighted to be here.
So, as Samir just mentioned, the purpose of the lecture is to try and frame a new perspective, or new, I would even say, a new narrative for the region. We, for quite some time at the World Bank, have in the run-up to the so-called Arab Spring, we've laid out a new strategy which concentrated on 4 pillars. For those who are not familiar, the first pillar was really the pillars of all pillars, and the idea is really to try and rethink what was the old social contract, which is that government typically in the region, and again, this lecture is not specifically focused on Lebanon, as you could, as you will see, it has a broader perspective. Lebanon having a private sector which is much more developed than many of the other countries in the region, but still, I think it has some relevance to Lebanon as well. So the idea is to try and frame the discussion in the context of renewing the social contract for the region. And the so-called Arab Spring really put to the fore that the old way of doing business in the region, which was very much one where public jobs, universal subsidies, and in a sense, de-risking the economy can no longer hold. And what this lecture tries to do is to move from that old social contract, which is again de-risking the economy in exchange of little voice and little accountability, which led to very weak service delivery on the part of the government and a lot of mistrust. So the intent of the lecture is to frame a new perspective on what could the new social contract look like in a region which is young, educated, and has a lot of aspiration. So the idea is to think about what sources of growth could make sense in this new context. And currently, as you all know, many of our young population are on social media, voicing their concern, if not grievances. And I think it is a connected generation that is begging to embrace what I would call the new service economy. So currently the traditional sector, could be understood in many different dimensions. I'm going to pick one, which is the construction, oil, utilities. So the traditional part of the economy has occupied quite a bit of the growth and of the effort of all our citizens in this region. And the promise of the new economy is to try and shift gears and move to a world, a structure of an economy where services become the true engine for growth. And I'm going to try and argue why this can be the case. So also in the narrative of the old social contract, there was a view that heavy industrialization or manufacturing would be the way. And again, the thinking was that the typical development trajectory would go from agriculture to industrialization, and then only then should we consider services. Clearly, China has reshaped that whole development path and the narrative around it, and it appears pretty clear that the jobs on manufacturing and the activity, which are increasingly being automated as well, are going to be clustered around China and Asia. And it looks unlikely that Africa and the Middle East are going to gain more of these manufacturing jobs. At least it looks like a pretty remote possibility. So the digital economy also in the West or in more advanced economies is typically seen as also destroying jobs, and we often hear in the media that jobs are being destroyed by the digitalization. I would like to argue somewhat against that narrative and argue that in fact when you look at numbers in Lebanon, Tunisia, the jobs that have been created mostly in SMEs and small startups. And in fact, I would also argue that the political economy, the resistance against this new service economy and then the digital transformation that comes with it is actually favorable for once to the region. So for this time around, being late could be, at least, there's a window in which being late could be an advantage. And we have example with Karim, for instance, in Saudi, and which spread to other countries where there was no resistance to the spread of that platform for ride sharing. So while comparing to France, where Uber drivers have had a hard time penetrating the market. So clearly there are elements that suggest that if that new social contract, if the empowerment of the youth through connecting them further in a productive way with the technology, if these appear to be a solid direction that we all take, there could be ways to leapfrog in interesting ways. Of course, the path is complicated, and it's not going to be easy. And I've visited this afternoon the digital district, and I've heard interesting stories about how the road ahead is going to be complex. But the digital district gives an interesting example of what the new economy could look like in many parts of the region, and perhaps even broadening its reach in Lebanon and well beyond Beirut. So Samir asked me also to give a bit of a macro context before I jump to the medium-run transformational issues. And then I'm going to speak, if I have time, about a very specific set of digital platforms that could be useful, including for job creation. So the macro context is, and you all know about it for the region, is that there is a continued momentum as a whole for the region, which is driven by improvement in the GCC, somewhat in Egypt as well, and a few other countries that are recovering from conflict, including Iraq somewhat. So the growth numbers that we are going to release very soon for our spring meeting are going to show that indeed there is a potential for, there's a renewed momentum for the region, but of course the region is still growing at 3% or so, which is well below what the true potential of the region should be. And certainly not enough to absorb the fast-growing labor market and the youth who are coming in every year. And so the factors that are supporting that increased momentum for growth are a global context which is more favorable, oil prices that are stabilized at a somewhat higher level, and the fact that stabilization policies have somewhat safeguarded macro stability and have benefited the region. Even so, a lot is to be done. On the risk part, of course, the context of this lecture, the tension are still very much heightened by discussion on the Syria, potential strike on Syria. So it's a very complex geopolitical context. And there's also from a macro standpoint, and this of course, the geopolitical context add to the uncertainty and potentially also slowing down investment and consumption. So there's also risk associated with the macro situation. While there was stabilization, deficits, both internal and external, are still looming. And of course, there is threat of a debt spiral, including of hidden debt, which could be an issue. In the medium run, the fall in oil prices, the Arab revolts, and the situation where the midstream situation where we are at, and the continued uncertainty of this persistent shock have really justified this relatively fast and speedy adjustment that many countries have proceeded with, including oil exporting countries, which have quite astonishingly, really responded pretty well to the drop in oil prices. So this was the first phase of the adjustment, but of course now again macro stabilization is not enough. And we need to enter that second phase where policies are much more structural in nature and transformative. Hence, the reason why I'd like to talk to you today about much more than this macro perspective. Just on for those interested in oil prices, and since it was my old hat, let me say a word about, so the expectation over the prospects for low for long oil prices are very well anchored. This is not up to date, I think, but still, as you can see, we are really in a scenario. The dotted line point to the futures market for the IMF, future-based forecast, if you wish, and then others use different methods. But so essentially, whichever forecast or projection you look at, they point to stable oil prices at a relatively low level compared to what we had in 2004, prior to the collapse that started in June 2014. So the point here is that why is it that we are in such a situation? In spite of the geopolitical tension, the oil price still remains relatively low. My take on that, and in the books that some of you picked up, we have a discussion on the role that technology has played in anchoring this expectation. So in a nutshell, the 2000 era, where demand, the size of the market through the increased demand of China, led to an impetus for R&D, research and development spending in the sector of extraction, and as a result led to a lot of innovation, which, when realized in the context of hydraulic fracking, and horizontal drilling or 3D imaging, as when the market realized that this potential for much more recoverable reserve, the market has anchored its expectation that we had much more potential for oil, and indeed has really profoundly changed the outlook for the oil market. So in a sense, I'd like you to shift away from the above the ground type of shocks that we see, for instance, disruption in Libya or geopolitical tension that disrupt the flow of oil production, to rather the profound technological forces that can play a much bigger role at expanding the frontier of production through the ballooning of recoverable and also economically viable reserve of oil. So in a nutshell, because of R&D spending triggered by an expanding market size, we had new technique coming to the fore, and they've expanded dramatically the pool of reserve under the ground, which set the expectation to oil prices to be low for long. I can expand on that, but I think that's an important explanation, and that's going to link to why it is very important today to understand that even so we are, it's less tangible than oil. The technological innovation that we see at the global level accelerating is also a force that's mostly external to the region, and that we need to understand how to harness so that then it translates into new engines of growth. So just a word on, so this is, if you wish, pre-Arab Spring surpluses in the cases of GCC and some other oil exporting countries, and since then we turn from external and internal surpluses to internal and external deficits, and this is true somewhat across the board, both for oil importer and oil exporter in the region, and that has to do with the linkages, of course, between oil exporter and oil importer through remittances, FDI, grants, and the like. And of course, since the Arab Spring, oil importer are also have faced a global context which has slowed down, but also increased uncertainty, which has also led them to adjust, stabilize in a similar fashion. So even so, oil prices should have benefited much more to oil importing countries. Everybody seems to be in the same basket when it comes to the difficulty that turning into deficits during this plunge in oil prices led them to. But of course, a lot of effort has been put towards stabilizing, sometimes with a lot of pain. Some countries have depreciated or let their currency depreciate, like in Egypt, which has somewhat helped with the stabilization of the economy, with some distributional consequences that were alleviated by some mitigating measure. But still, on the macro front, even so not everything is rosy, a lot has been done. But now the hard task is to try and think transformationally at the second phase of the adjustment. And hence the discussion today on services and the digital transformation. And again, I'd like to set the framework clear here. There are important forces transforming the global economy. They have to do with technological innovation that are changing our life, social life sometime, but not yet transforming our economies. I think some countries are better placed. Lebanon certainly is in the region. It has very strong university, and AUB is certainly a beacon of excellence in Lebanon and in the region. And there is a potential to connect better the pool of talented individuals coming out of this prestigious institution and turning them to connect with this new technological wave, help the leapfrogging, and turn a new engine for growth. So in a sense, and since we are in the economics department, allow me to just say a word about the type of conceptual framework we typically have. So if you've done economics classes, typically when it comes to pricing and derived from the maximization of profits, we typically think about pricing at the marginal cost as really the core principle that should guide our thinking when it comes to assessing whether the market is well functioning and whether we are heading in the right direction when it comes to profit maximization. But of course, what's interesting, and this platform I'm going to talk about, the connecting demand and supply, whether it's in the context of the restaurant business, ride sharing, anything you can think about, matchmaking, anything you want to think about. These platforms have been around. It's just that now they've been turbo boosted by the digital transformation we are experiencing. Distance doesn't matter so much anymore. We've got a very different situation here, and this has challenged our, typical economic principle with which we typically judge whether an activity or business is likely to be profitable. And this is all my intuition here are derived from a book by Richard Schmalenze from the MIT Business School. And the title of the book, if those interested, is Matchmakers. So he goes into depth over the business of what we call in economics multi-sided platform. Multi-sided because there are different types of actors involved. So in a sense, and the recent testimony by Mark Zuckerberg is interesting in that respect. Is when asked by a senator whether he was selling the data, he basically simply responded that he was running on ads. This gives us a glimpse of why is it that the way in which we've traditionally thought about this new digital economy cannot be apprehended with the typical tools that we have at our disposal, but rather here there was a complete rethink of the economics of digital platform, again turbo boosted by the digital transformation that internet and the like have brought together, including also the securing of payment with blockchain technology and the like. So the point here, if I just I don't want to go into too much of the economics of this platform, but again, if you take the example from that book of an application called OpenTable. OpenTable is, so many of you may be familiar, I'm not sure if it's operating in Lebanon, but it's basically an application that allows you to book a table in a restaurant for free. So the business of free services, including when you purchase, you subscribe to a credit card or any type of card, you've realized that a lot more services are free these days. So this participates into the new economics of platform, of digital platform. And I say the new economics because typically we would have, again, with the same principle, thought about pricing you at the marginal cost, and as you're using it, we should have basically price that service that we're offering. In fact, here the game and OpenTable provide a great example of how OpenTable became successful. It started by trying to register as many consumer in the US as possible. It still didn't make money, even though it had 100,000 or more. And it realized at some point that what it needed to book restaurants through this application, through that digital platform, what it needed to do was to have pockets in specific cities of enough dense pockets so that then there would be an interest on the restaurant to register with the platform. And there, at that very point, when they understood that gathering people not everywhere or anywhere in the US, but in specific pockets of where a restaurant would start to be interested, consumers themselves would join en masse because they knew then that there were more restaurants in the platform they could access to when booking the table. And this led to a virtuous cycle of the platform becoming a central platform in booking restaurant tables. And again, restaurant tables, and of course the OpenTable does bill restaurant for a fixed fee each time somebody, if you book a table as a consumer, it's free, but for the restaurant, the OpenTable charges the restaurant owner a fee each time there's a table booked. And the reason why it allows itself to charge the restaurant is because in a restaurant, it works with a fixed cost. Once you open a night, if you have 5 tables free, paying $1 extra if you can get extra consumer is actually very appealing because we already incurred the fixed cost. So more people coming in, charging $1 or so, really would improve the bottom line of this restaurant in a major way. But again, the point I want to leave you with is the issue with economic development is the problem of the chicken and the egg. It's always not enough saving, not enough capital, not enough to boost the economy with investment and productivity, but rather here, the digital platform, the new economics of digital platform tell us that it's possible to crack that knot of development at the micro level, if you wish, by thinking strategically about what we call indirect externality. The fact that in the platform there is enough restaurant makes the consumer better off and vice versa. And these are new thinking that are percolated into economics, which have really changed our traditional way of teaching and understanding economics. So what I'm trying to argue here is that the digital transformation, the technological wave that are mostly external to the region have been really an important source of radical change or transformation in many countries, including and perhaps primarily also in the US and now Asia and Europe for some time. But to really crack some of the developmental challenge that we have, I think one needs to think carefully about how these new ingredients, or these new players, how can they play a role in improving the type of services we have access to across the spectrum, how these services can improve our logistical chain, distribution chains, and it's not just about the digital platform, but digital platform offer a really interesting test case of how we can crack some of the most heavy and difficult nuts as to why we are in a place where utilities are not performing well. So introducing some of these digital platform could be interesting ways in which we bring new actors and new technology to disrupt some of the incumbent problem we have in some countries. So this is setting up a bit of the framework and the new thinking. But let me go through quickly. I know I don't have so much time, but and I have a very long presentation, but I want to take you through the challenges that we are faced with in the region. And just to tell you, and we have a friend here from the ILO who can correct me if I'm overstating some of these numbers, but I'm doing this deliberately. So if you think of the UN population data that we have, the projection, over 50 years, so from 2000 to 2050, we calculated that if every young people, male and female, enter the labor market or choose to enter the labor market, meaning that if the labor force participation of everybody of age 15 and above were to be included in that calculation, there will be net 300 million jobs needed to be created between 2000 and 2050. This is, of course, with a medium run scenario of projection. So this tells you the challenge that the region is faced with. And 300 million new job, net of those reaching 65 years old, which is in many countries the legal also retirement age. So clearly, if you net out those potentially leaving the labor market, you get net 300 million new jobs needed to be created between. So this is astronomical for the region. It's basically almost the entire current total population of MENA. For Africa, things are, I think the challenge is also enormous. It's 800 million new job, and to the extent that sub-Saharan Africa is also adding pressure to North Africa and to the Middle East. Clearly, these are enormous challenges. They are of a proportion that really require that job creation become the central piece of focus for all of us. So, and then we've broken down this in different countries. So in a nutshell, for each country, they would have to create as many jobs as the total current population that they have in 50 years. And that has already started because we started in 2000. And of course, when you look at this granularly, you have many more graduates coming in the labor market. And even so, MENA is aging fast, relatively fast. And this tension is receding as we go. There is adjusting for the expectation is probably increasing in terms of expectation of what the type of job that are needed. So there is a big challenge here, which is we've got more educated people coming in, more women educated who aspire to have good jobs. And so far, the pace of job creation is nowhere near to make any dent on that major challenge. And of course, I have to caveat that with the fact that when you look at numbers from the ILO, here presented as a World Development Indicator, but originally from the ILO, you've got very low participation rate for female and male in the region. And of course, you could argue that female participation rate below 30%, which is really, again, this is well below the world and OECD average. And women today are aspiring, because they're well educated, are aspiring to good new job, and they're coming in very rapidly. And that reality is changing only very slowly, also because of the lack of opportunities presented by the current economic model reliant on public jobs, and given the macro situation and the lack of fiscal space, there would be no way to make this public sector-led growth engine sustainable. So there are some interesting facts on labor force participation, but again, we are working hard on this. But so this is the share of employment of people employed with a higher education degree, and as you can see, it's rising in MENA. So we've got this pipeline of people coming in, and in addition to the numbers, the expectation set by coming out of school with a higher degree really speak to the challenge ahead. Of course, some choose to, when they have the opportunity to leave countries, and that's also adding to the challenge, because many of the talent that could be a force in this new economy are also not injecting their energy. I'm sorry, this has shifted a bit. But so then there is this interesting nexus, and again, Lebanon is more advanced when it comes to cashless payment. I have read some of the work on the fact that access to credit card, e-payment are somewhat okay. I think again much more can be done, but the region as a whole, even so, it has access to mobile, it has access to, and it was one of the highest penetration of mobile, smartphone, just below the advanced economy, and the large youth share as the lowest cashless payment. So it's, even so, it's connected to social media, and I'm going to go through that. It has the least seamless financial system in the world. Even so, those are middle-income countries. Internet penetration is fairly high, as you can see, not always of the great quality and affordability for a variety of reasons, and we can discuss that. But it's mostly for social media. So if I allow myself, I would say for unproductive use, even so people are reaping the private benefit. They're staying connected with their family. From an economic standpoint, clearly, and for the economy as a whole, we would love to see a lot more tech entrepreneur, tech worker, as much as continued social media activity. But really, I think most of the social activity is in is as a grievance to or the frustration that they could not do more on the productive internet economy side of things. So yeah, I think it's improving the internet infrastructure, but also improving payment system, basic payment system, is really a direction that we should be taking. Cashless payment in some countries in the region, including the UAE. Is fairly so the digitalization of the economy is really at its infancy. Even so, again, internet penetration, mobile, smartphone is very high, especially with the young population. Of course, some countries are taking off, and again, Lebanon is, I don't have the number here, but they're doing better. I understand that the numbers on e-commerce show that it's expanding fast in Lebanon. But of course, a lot more needs to be done. And when it comes to trying to qualitatively assess what's going on in the heads of many in the region, there is a perspective that nepotism is predominant. And Lebanon, it seems, relatively high. And we also have some limited, so I think this is the, is that the trust, or trust in government? So in Egypt, it's pretty high, relatively high. It's still only 60%. In Lebanon, we're not doing so well. But maybe there are reasons there that we can elaborate on. But mistrust associated, in my view, with the poor public service quality that we are getting for hand of the bargain. So clearly, there is a lot to be changed through much more economic empowerment and also much more risk-taking. Remember, the old social contract was all about de-risking the economy, not having economic actors taking risk. The government would take risk, would provide the job, would pay your electricity bill, and you would not take risk. So that has to change for the economy to function on a on a growth engine that's sustainable, and potentially, again, that economic empowerment of the youth through the service and the digital economy can be a good direction. I'm going to go through this quickly. There are some green shoots, especially on the digital platform front. You've all heard about Kareem, the ride-sharing company, which prides itself as having created many jobs and having a market valuation of over $1 billion. It's mimicking Uber. We have a Souk also, which is a kind of Amazon, which has been purchased for $500 million on Amazon. And then we have Jamalon, which is I think a different book-selling platform. So I'm not going to go through that. I'm going to go through this. I don't know if how much more time I have. 10? Okay, good. So I'm going to go through that. That would be for the discussion, maybe. But I'm going to go through this quickly and then just say a word about what I consider as an interesting set of very practical platform that could give much more hope on the job front, and I'm going to give you detail on. So, of course, and we had a conference in Algiers recently, a regional conference in discussing this new economy agenda, and we came up with these five really takeaway from the conference. The first one is the region has failed to deliver on the integration 1.0, so mostly goods traded among countries. It has been difficult. We're more hopeful about integration 2.0, which would be more of a service type of integration. And for that, of course, internet connectivity within country, between countries, payment system improvement within country and between countries is essential. The region has the tendency to be very segmented in its legal systems, and that's really frustrating the development of operation that need scale. So we are in between, we're at a place where we would like people to focus on regional integration and use the fact that culturally, language-wise, we could have as a market, the regional market, but unfortunately it's so segmented that at times it's better to try and cater to the global economy and innovate more rather than adapt. So on finance and payment system, I already spoke about this. And also the other aspect, which is I think relevant for the region, is the region in its approach toward regulation. Again, having the perspective of the old social contract, has always thought regulation through the lens of the prudential aspect. So ensuring trust in the financial system, avoiding risk as the primary focus, and much less so as regulation or a lack thereof as a catalyst for competition, contestability, and innovation. So clearly, the testimony by Mark Zuckerberg, the CEO of Facebook, really is telling about where the US is when it came to not regulating or allowing for some self-regulation for some of these tech giants to emerge. And the region has taken somewhat the opposite stance, which is that it was regulating ex ante, and so it didn't know the ecosystem, did regulate ex ante, and asphyxiated innovation and contestability. So clearly there's a need for a rethink, a complete rethinking of the way regulation is being used, especially in the context of this renewed risk-taking on the part of young individuals who are ready, who are tech-savvy, and who would want to take more risk, but also earn the return associated with such risk-taking. Of course, in the context of more risk-taking, one has to also rethink the social protection. So typically, social protection in the region is associated with the so-called Bismarckian model, which is that you will get social protection only if you have a formal job, and especially a public job. Now, in this context of a renewed focus on the new economy, one needs to really move with a more universal type of coverage, which would basically allow allow, perhaps with a less generous system, but more universal, which will allow to bring the informal sector, which is currently avoiding red tape and evading taxes, but really allow, by digitalizing parts of the economy, to allow everyone to be covered in a generous way, so as to somewhat take the opposite side of this risk-taking, so provide a cushion to this more risk-taking society. So we can talk about the informal sector and the experience of India in trying to demonetize and the mixed result this led to. But I think that this whole rethinking of regulation is essential, and we can get back to it. Education, I think this could I could leave for the stage of the discussion. I'd love to discuss some of the views I've heard in the digital district on what more could be done to connect better the digital ecosystem that's emerging with universities. And I understand AUB is already experimenting with many accelerators or venture capital type of approaches to support that new economy. And of course the role of the diaspora, it could be interesting. The fact that government purchase could be used as window to leapfrog and identify what are the needs and ways in which we could contemplate leapfrogging. And then I'll finish with the law of, the so-called law of unicorn. Typically, when thinking about venture capitalism, we think about investing in startups which are at an advanced stage. Yeah, what we really want to think about when it comes to detecting unicorn, the startup that actually become billion-dollar company and more, is that we need to be more inclusive, in a sense that we need to have to cast a wider net, perhaps with using smaller amounts, but a wider net to give a chance to fresh startups that are experimenting. And perhaps also, in thinking about this law of unicorn, one needs to think about the gains from having more risk-taking, more giving more people a chance to fight the incumbent problem that we have. And so as to disrupt many of the incumbent and creating that learning society, that vibrant ecosystem. But also because failing, and many of the startups are bound to fail, because failing is potentially the seeds that is going to be brought to the unicorn. So when a company doesn't make it, it could be easily hired by the company who did make it. And therefore, having that motion in place of trials and error is really going to contrast with the fact that in many countries in the region we have graduates sitting on the sideline, not experimenting, not being in fact attractive as a commodity for the companies that are emerging as unicorn, because they've not tried enough and they were not given the opportunity to try. And so clearly there is a view that setting up a wider net to a wider set of startups, not with the expectation that they will all succeed, but with the expectation that if they try, they're going to be very useful for the next round of development that we will see, which is the development of unicorns, which are going to need talent and experience. So I think I'm going to stop here so I can allow some time for questions. Thank you.
We do have time for we have a few, about 20 minutes of discussion. I'm going to start with Khaled, and then with Salim, and Ali. Okay, I have three now. Let's start with Khaled, and then Boke and Yanja. So we have 4 questions on the card.
Thank you, Rabah, for a very interesting presentation. I'll get straight to the point. I liked a lot of what you said, and I agree with you on one thing. There's no doubt that we need to, in the future of this region, consider. First of all, sorry, I'm Khaled from ESQA, so I'm an economist for those. I was here a few weeks ago, so I'm assuming that some of the familiar faces know me. But I mean, basically, I agree with you on the importance of thinking about the implications of moving to a knowledge economy. We in Esquire are doing that. And I'd like to give you, just to catch up on some of this discussion, one of those efforts that we're doing. So we started to simulate a possible transformation, long-term transformation of the Egyptian economy from now until 2030 by relying on knowledge subsectors. And of course, I'm not going to go into the technical details of how we define that, but it's broadly similar to what you're discussing here. Now, we found, and this is based on a CGE model with Professor Moataz Khurshid, and it's a lot of work went to it. But basically, what we found is it will not really lead to much structural transformation. So if you look at the structure of the Egyptian economy in 2013 or 14, when we started the SAM year, look at it in 2030, is not really much structural transformation. The reason for that is you're not getting the export-led push that happened in Korea and that led to the massive quick transformation. So yes, of course, the growth rate is higher in that scenario than the business as usual scenario. I'm not going to argue that, but you're not getting that kind of structured transformation. Now remember, when you say here that you also want to do that and skip the manufacturing, because that's what's implicit here, or not skip it altogether, but I guess not rely on it as much as possible. For a country like Egypt and many countries in this region, what is it that the main message is saying? We're saying basically you have to import food because we know that that's a structural deficiency. So a lot of the money will have to go into food imports. You're not going to rely much on manufacturing-led exports or commodity exports for that matter. Therefore, what you're saying is that you're going to rely on non-conventional service exports for you to overcome your balance of payments constraint. So I'm thinking of it in terms of the basic dynamics of how are you going to solve the third world law problem. And if that's the case, then we have to go into a much more detailed analysis of how to make this quantum leap, because I don't see it happening as simple as that without looking at the demand side, which I'm afraid I did not hear you discuss at all. So even if I were to grant you that you are going to make this very difficult transformation, which we in our paper didn't see happen even when we tried it, how are you going to do it without discussing the demand side? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Khalid. Salim.
Thank you, Khalid. Thank you for your question. I had something similar in mind. Again, since the start of the drop in the oil prices a decade ago, we heard many governments talking about diversification, right? The transformation, the changes. But at the same time, what we've seen is this shift from a twin surplus to a twin deficit. Most of those governments, especially in the GCC, started to take fiscal measures, came out with the VAT, now we're having that. This is hurting the consumers at the end of the day. At a time where the public sector is slowing down in terms of investment, and the private sector is also adversely affected by the geopolitical uncertainty. So you look at this mix and you question whether we have a chance in building on a diversified economy. And I would like to hear your views on the next step for our economies. This demand side maybe, how to diversify, how to succeed that experience, if any.
Thank you. I have 3 small observations. The first one is, I'm surprised that you left manufacturing out of the new economy model. The second point is that I'm not really quite sure that the new economy will be generating enough jobs to absorb the labor coming into the market. I give you a small example. I think WhatsApp is run only by 50 people. My third observation is you seem to have left politics out of the picture, especially things that do with, how to increase governance and how to, reduce corruption and so forth.
Thank you, Rabah, for your excellent presentation, of course. And some of the questions have been already, discussed by Khalid and the previous speaker. I have a specific point. You mentioned, service economy is the new economy. Actually, the current economy is also the service economy in the region. And unfortunately, it's a bad service economy. The contribution to output is much less than it absorbs the employment, and that's why the informality problem in the region is much acute than any other part of the world you can see. Now, if you see that internet service is much accessed by the people and used by the people, but you don't see same internet being used for digital payment, where is the problem? Is it problem of not adhering to the systems, or is it the problem of capacity to pay and declare? Is the income. So do you think that if people are getting internet services only, will it generate or will it create enough accelerators to the growth of the economy, without solving the demand side problem? So if the structural transformation doesn't happen, if the productivity doesn't happen, which is the lowest in the world right now in the region, then how can you solve the problem by just digitizing or providing internet service to the people? So I would like to hear your thoughts on this aspect.
I think one more question,
Nader Kairouz from ILO. I like the presentations, but I want to link between two points that from the beginning, from the first slide and the last slide. You talked about Uber in France and Karim in Saudi Arabia, and I want to link it to the social protection. The difference between the Uber or the drivers in France is that they have a decent work. In fact, they have access to social protection, to many facilities that they have during their work, which is not the case for the Karim or the Uber in our region, and it raises the question about what types of economy we want to create. If we only created jobs just to resolve numbers, saying yes, you have a number of million of new enter the market, and we have a job that doesn't really provide sustainability and also they will say a decent work. And second, talking about the statistics, in fact, measuring these type of the gig economy and this type of contracts, the zero-hour contracts, and what we call the submissive contracting or dependent contracting, it causes a problem for the projections. I like the idea that you enter the technology in the projection of the price of the commodity, but I think it's a good an idea to insert these variables in the projection of the supposed model that you are creating here. Thank you.
Thank you. Rabah, before the lecture, you told me that you are looking forward to questions that will help you develop your lectures, your paper. Yep. And I think you got a good number of them, so, so go ahead.
No, thank you very much. I didn't get everybody's name, so I'm going to just respond by themes. So you helped me when you mentioned that I didn't speak so much about the traditional manufacturing or whatever. So clearly, for the purpose of being conceptually clear and aspirational, I presented the new economy as services and digital only. But of course, one should not oppose the traditional economy and the new economy. In fact, in many respects, a restaurant is getting a huge boost potentially from digital platform, and we've seen that in many places. So more jobs, more bottom line is brought to the fore by digitalization. So it could expand the realm of these traditional actors. So of course there is a direct job that are the direct number of jobs by this platform is small, but the indirect could be very large, and studies are that indeed I'm going to use the the phrase by the famous growth economist, Nobel laureate Robert Solow, who argued that computers are everywhere except in the productivity statistics. So even so, I don't think we could function effectively without computer. We have a difficulty to capture them. So not measuring them, not being able to trace the indirect effect doesn't tell me that those are not job-creating activities. And when we speak about productivity, clearly, here you go. If you want to follow the productivity path, follow the technology path. And for too long, we've been just adding, capital factors and not harnessing the technological know-how. So as to the CG approach, I'm not familiar with the type of model you're using. But clearly here again, and I want to reiterate this, is that we really need to bring some new economics here, new economics thinking. So yes, I absolutely agree that Lebanon is a small open economy and needs to cater to more market when it comes to services. But again, it's broader than services. And it needs, for that, in the region we would need more integration, and I talked about that. But it also is important to realize that the trade in services, even though it's poorly measured as well, is exploding. And yes, I do agree that the past is not a good guide for the future. And trade is being dematerialized, and the value of trade is in selling software, apps, and I think is much more valuable than the traditional commodities. So we need to really shift our thinking away from, there was a time when selling hardware was important. Now it's software. It was software, and now it's data. So I think this thinking has to evolve in such a way that we don't minimize services as a source of growth. But I agree that small markets like the Middle Eastern ones need to, of course, have a global approach to selling these services. And again, I don't want to oppose new and traditional economy. They are complementary in many respects. And many of the stuff I'm arguing are extensive margin stuff. So I'm actually also interested in ways in which, for health and social protection, we could now deliver services at a much cheaper cost. We could deliver vocational training in remote area at a much cheaper cost. I can think of members of my family in remote areas in Algeria who are paying very high prices for doctors in clinics. They could have cheap access to medical services thanks to these new services. So the cost of delivering services is going down. We're going to be in a much better shape to improve the quality and the reach of our services, and will bring more inclusion as a result. So I think I would be tempted to look at it from a traditional model standpoint, but I also would like for us to be humble about what this new digital transformation is bringing. And and the path to productivity is really harnessing and finding ways in which we can harness the power of these mostly external forces. And yes, we've tried to build a knowledge economy. We've educated young people, but we've not put them to use. So I don't think the region has any other direction it could take than the one that putting young people to productive use in where their knowledge is most valued, which is a sector that rewards high-level skills. And for that, I think the continuum between universities and the digital and so economy has to be present. Well, on the politics, I agree that I try to put politics away by talking about a new social contract and that there would be a need for more space, economic empowerment. But of course, these considerations of corruption are very important. Hopefully, we can we can promote new ways, and I had a set of slides on that, by being much more transparent in that new economy, and instigating transparency and promoting new ways, and I think the digital transformation can allow us to move toward a more transparent and a more equitable ways of doing business. I don't think I did justice to everything, but I'll just say a word on diversification. So I think at the moment we've got many economy where real estate type of investment have crowded out most of the rest of the activities, and again we've not put to use our brainy student. So again, I think it's not so much diversification but transformation that I think we should promote. And the transformation, I think the path to transformation is one where we empower more of these young entrepreneurs and have them lead in many respects. And on that, I would like to finish on the note, which is that I've been humbled by the experience of organizing this conference in Algiers, because we've uncovered a very buoyant ecosystem, and I've witnessed some of that today in the digital district. But I've also seen that in Algiers, a very buoyant new generation, finding solution, being much more pragmatic. And I think we as economists, as an international organization, the government, have to be humbled by the solution that this young generation is bringing. And we shouldn't have a top-down approach, but rather try and have a bottom-up approach and see where these solutions are emerging and not stopping them. So follow the lead. I think payment system, light touch regulation, I should say. Those are ways in which we can encourage the green shoots we've seen. And trust me, if we were to do systematic surveys of startup emerging, we'll be surprised and humbled by what this generation is doing.
Thank you, Rabah. I do have a question from our senior students. Go ahead.
Hello, Talal Qabbani, Dr. Maktisi's class. So I really like the presentation. It's a very interesting perspective of how things are going. If I were to put it in a simple way, I'm thinking of the MENA economy as a machine. And the old software is the old economy that you're talking about, public jobs and de-risking. And what we're talking about here is a new software that's based on the knowledge and advanced things. I think the software won't simply work on this current machine in the Arab world. And what I'm trying to say, or the MENA, what I'm trying to say here, this machine has very poor infrastructure in terms of, so you mentioned here payment systems, which is one of the important things for a knowledge economy. The other things include electricity, which are terrible. Other things include political systems that are inefficient, and also there's also the fact that I think I agree with the gentleman here with manufacturing jobs. If there are a lot of people who need jobs. Do you think that we should think of the MENA region as a place for low-cost labor to include all of these people who are looking for jobs in addition to the people who want to be part of the knowledge economy? Thank you.
Other students who may wish to pose questions to Dr. Erskine? No.
Someone who graduated a few years ago.
When did you graduate? 2 years ago?
Actually, I read an article a long time ago written by Bill Gates, and he said the difference between us and the rest of the world, we have the best capital market, and any time we have an idea, we have cash to support that idea. whether the capital market, IBOs, or the junk bond market. Do we have in the Middle East that capital market that can really support the real innovation? Real innovation means the telecommunication, the biotechnology, all those good ideas. Do we need a very sophisticated capital market to really engineer that change from the 19th century economy to the 21st century economy? Because without that financing, without that risk, because the definition of service is really limited the way it's described here, because in America, services is very sophisticated term, and it's very it include all kind of sort of technology. So how much we have to emphasize in building that capital market in the Middle East?
Yes, I have a third from another student over there, please.
Hi, so just a quick question.
Your
Oh,
name?
yes. I'm Danielle, and also a student of Dr. Makdisi. So you discussed the evolution of payment systems and the entrance in the technological world, and I'm curious, as a parallel to that, the evolution of currency itself and it becoming more technological, such as Bitcoin and other forms of currency that are now becoming part of the technological world rather than the physical one necessarily, and how you see that playing a role in what you discussed in building this infrastructure. Is it a point where it's just a further division between the more developed countries, or is there a way to introduce this new currency and way of purchasing power to allow for greater development? Thank you.
I'll be brief. You know, so on this aspect of the knowledge economy and the new service economy, and again the notion that this might not be the true engine for growth, or may not be enough to address the challenges, and we still need to hold to manufacturing. Again, for the purpose of the lecture, I opposed new and traditional economy, but again, there are many opportunities for traditional businesses to be turbo boosted by that digitalization. And again, there are parts of the territory, some region which are not integrated at the moment. It might be an opportunity to do just that. India has a recent experience where one of the internet provider gave for free for I think 2 years data plans to people who were in a remote area. So 200 million people, new people, got connected. This is the promise of a whole much bigger market for the service economy. It's a leapfrogging. I mean, it's a step toward leapfrogging. And again, the new economic thinking is to get people joining and being connected, so as to have them as consumer, but also potentially actors. And we had several sessions on the digital agriculture. So again, one has to, I think people visualize this very well when it comes to commodity market, commodity prices, and how these external development affect us. But I think it's less clear in the case of technology. But these changes, these technological waves that we are experiencing are so profound. And the one that was mentioned with cryptocurrency, I'd like to actually make the point that it's not so much cryptocurrency or currency per se, but the blockchain technology underpinning this transformation that is important. Imagine that thanks to blockchain now we can secure any transaction, and how much more trust, how much we can put in the system and fluidify this economy. So my sense here is that we need to crack that development trap. And we've seen micro cases, case studies of where this has been cracked. So my sense is that we've built that pool of educated youth. They're sitting on the sideline. We are building up their expectation. If we were to take a leap forward in trying to have them experiment more, it may be that we don't have to choose the direction, but rather follow the leads. And I think that that's really what the promise of this new generation, which is much more pragmatic, much more into finding solution to local problem. And when it comes to electricity, there are ways in which we could think about decentralized solution to address the problem of failure of services provided by the government. So there are decentralized ways of producing your own electricity, providing cheaper ways of producing your own electricity, and then providing it back to the grid and selling it. So I think we've got to be much more creative, and my overall message is that, in the word of the Nobel laureate Joe Stiglitz, we've got to create these learning societies. And by learning societies, really this notion that we can't have graduates sitting on the sideline. We've got to let them experiment. Policies have to experiment as well. And yes, we can sit here and say, no, but really manufacturing is important, and still wait for that to happen. Rather, we've got tech-savvy or potentially tech-savvy young individual who could be part of an army of people who could find solution to this local problem and then export them. On the capital market, I cannot agree more, but I understand from my colleagues there at the Digital District that Lebanon had made a very interesting a move toward trying to provide guarantees for a number of startups. And these schemes suggest that there are new impulses to try and provide financing. But at the end of the day, it's good quality. Good quality project, good ideas, and but of course, finding new ways of doing venture capital, creating the culture takes time. But I'm confident that if we build or help build success stories, much more VCs are going to be interested in that. That's going to set in motion an economy where finance is helping rather than speculating in real estate or other sectors. I'm just going to stop here.
Thank you. Salim?
I just have I'm an investment banker. And I just received a WhatsApp message from one of my friends. It's okay. Who's an investment banker. He's currently in India. I just got the message. So he's looking for investment in a private equity context. And he visited a bank in one of those regions, and he's describing it. Allow me just to state. So the Indian economy is growing at 7%, and the bank he saw has 5 million clients, has 14 million mobile banking clients, 5,000 ATMs. The bank has $2.5 billion deposit. It's a small one. Huh? It's a small bank. It has a return on equity of 20%. My point here is that to go into new economy, digitalization, our kids, our entrepreneurs need scalability. And when we look at the BDD experience, when we look at those innovative experiences, whenever they want to shine, to grow, they are forced to leave. Because unfortunately, our markets are small, scattered, they are spread everywhere, but we're not well connected. It needs much more to have our economies grow into a digitalized environment. That stability we were talking about, that openness within our environment. I don't know what is your view on that.
Excuse me, were you relaying Rabah's lecture to your friend in India? No.
No, I was just trying to, I'm looking at
Thank you. I think you started with the issue of chicken and egg problem. So, I mean, you have referred to India also, I mean, with regarding digitization, and I am aware of how it is happening. It is happening at a time when India has a continuous growth path, and in some way wages have grown, in some way personal income has grown, and that has given a sustained momentum to digitize the economy. And even recently also, digitization in India has really taken its transformation in terms of compliance to income tax and putting up an infrastructure for billion people to have the personal, identification card, and they have really gone much ahead in trying to digitize. Whether that should come first or the structure of the economy should come first. I mean, I'm still pondering over whether digitization can bring sustained income by itself, or should the structure of the economy need to be corrected so that it can generate growth and sustained income. That can drive the internet services and the digitization further to what, if you talk it quote unquote transformative. So that's what I am still not able to get out of what you are thinking on that side. Thank you.
Just a final quick follow-up on the last two comments, which I agree with. I mean, essentially, the point is there seems to be, I mean, I'm not an expert on digital economy and knowledge economy issues, but there seems to be a consensus that you need to have the level effect. That, in other words, it doesn't matter the percentage of R&D that a small country would spend for as part of its GDP is not as important unless it reaches a certain level for you to be able to get the spillovers. For all the Arab countries put together, don't spend on R&D the equivalent of a small country in Europe or Spain. I know that was one of the findings we had in the Arab Human Development Report. You need to get to that level effect. That brings me back to the demand side question. What is it that governments can do in order to get you to the point where you can start having these level spillover effects that are needed in order for you to attain your positive effects that you're looking for? Thank you.
Thank you, Khalid.
So no, I do agree that those are segmented in small market, but we may not have the size, but we have talent, and this talent, if connected, and again, distance does matter much less now, thanks to the digital transformation that we are experiencing. So if you manage to be competitive at the individual level, because you're talented and you can connect globally, you can sell your apps globally. It may require that you have the right payment system. It may require that imports and exports are not impeded. But I honestly think that if you've got talent, if they are able to plug in to global markets, selling their services is the way forward. And yes, it does require R&D, and we're spending very little on that. We're hoping this will evolve, but adapting the current economy to digitalization and including the government services can only help us gain some momentum in terms of growth. I can see, for instance, that many of the traffic might be related to people having to go collect a form or having to go collect things physically. I can see how digitalizing the government can help us in a variety of ways. So rather than looking at at all the obstacles that separate us from connecting our youth to a productive use of the internet, I think we should try and put to rest the old romanticized views of manufacturing and low-paying jobs, and try and be ambitious to try and be competitors in that global economy.
Can I have
So, Ali, half a minute.
I was just wondering, okay, there will be growth. I think there will be impressive growth. But given that all countries in the world are doing this, we'll be able to catch up? Will there be convergence? Because, you know, all the economies converged using the traditional model. But that was at a time when other countries were moving away from manufacturing. So they were able to fill the gaps, and they converged. But now everybody is going into this new economy. Would the catch-up thesis still hold for us?
No, so this is a very important question, and thank you for asking it. But again, these are external wave, external to MENA, but there is a differentiated impact on countries. So the alternative to what you're suggesting is, if we don't do anything, we'll be completely, we might lose 20 years, not 2 years.
I agree with you.
So, but my point is this, is to translate what is an external wave with blockchain and all this technology into an internal growth engine. We've got to do a lot of these, connecting the payment system, allowing for experimentation, daring on regulation, in a sense removing many of these obstacles so we can have a chance to not be 20 years behind. So I don't think the alternative of not believing or not trusting that the learning economy is the way forward is an alternative. It's going to set us 40 years behind, in spite of having the talent pool to be able to leapfrog.
I'm sorry, all good things have to come to an end. And I want to thank you all for very stimulating, thought-provoking questions, which I'm sure Rabah would extremely welcomes. And thank you very much, Rabah, for a very stimulating lecture. Thank you.